The day I discovered my children had signed over our family home to Vanessa, their stepmother and my ex-husband's former secretary, was the day I stopped believing in family loyalty. For 30 years, I had cared for dying patients, raised my children through college, and kept our home running while my husband built his business. And how did they repay me? By handing the keys to the woman who destroyed my marriage. But what they didn't know was that I possessed something they never expected. Something that would turn their perfect little betrayal completely upside down. Before we dive back in, let us know where you're tuning in from. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because tomorrow, I've got something even more special lined up just for you. The day I discovered my children had signed over my family home to Vanessa, their stepmother and my ex-husband's former secretary, was the day I stopped believing in family loyalty. After 30 years of sacrifices, after nursing dying patients back to health, putting both my children through college, and keeping our home running while my husband built his business, this was how they repaid me. By handing over the keys to the woman who destroyed my marriage. What they didn't know was I had something none of them expected. Something that would turn their perfect little betrayal upside down. My name is Helen Carter. For nearly 3 decades, I worked as a pediatric nurse at Boston Memorial Hospital, specializing in the oncology ward where children faced battles no child should ever have to fight. The night shifts were brutal, the emotional toll even worse. Yet I never complained, not when Thomas had soccer tournaments that I rushed to after double shifts. Not when Amanda needed help with her science projects after I'd spent 12 hours on my feet. Not when Richard, my husband, needed me to host dinners for potential clients while I was running on 3 hours of sleep. "You're a miracle worker, Helen," my friends would say. "I don't know how you do it all." The truth was, I didn't either. I just did what needed to be done. Richard was building Carter Enterprises from the ground up, and someone needed to keep our home and family intact. I became the glue. I made lunches, attended parent-teacher conferences, drove carpools, all while working full-time in one of the most demanding nursing positions at the hospital. Our colonial home in Lakeside Heights was my pride and joy. I planted every rose bush along the garden path with my own hands, selected every paint color, and spent weekends restoring the original hardwood floors myself to save money during the lean years. That house wasn't just a building. It was the physical manifestation of every sacrifice I made. When Thomas was accepted to Harvard Law, I picked up extra shifts to help with tuition. When Amanda wanted to study abroad during her junior year, I sold my grandmother's antique jewelry collection, the only inheritance I had, to make it happen. I never regretted it. Their futures were worth every sacrifice. "Mom, you didn't have to do that," Amanda said when she found out about the jewelry. "Your education is more important than some old rings and necklaces," I told her. "They're just things. You're my future." I believed that with my whole heart. I thought they understood what I'd given up for them. I thought they valued it. But I was wrong. When Richard's business finally took off in our 15th year of marriage, I was thrilled. Finally, all our hard work was paying off. But success changed him. The late nights at the office grew more frequent. The business trips multiplied. I noticed the faint scent of unfamiliar perfume on his shirts when I did laundry. "You're imagining things," he said when I mentioned it. "You're just exhausted from those hospital shifts. Maybe it's time you cut back." I didn't cut back. Our kids were in college, expenses were mounting, and someone needed to keep saving for the future. Richard, meanwhile, was spending more and more. A new car, expensive watches, lavish client dinners. Someone had to be practical in our 22nd year of marriage. Then Richard hired Vanessa Mitchell as his executive assistant. She was barely 40, with a business degree and ambition that matched his own. I met her at the company Christmas party, where she shook my hand and said, "Helen, Richard talks about you constantly. It's impressive how you've managed to stay relevant in nursing at your age." The backhanded compliment stung, but I smiled politely. I was 59, not ancient. 6 months later, Richard sat me down in our kitchen, the kitchen I'd remodeled myself the previous summer. "Helen, this isn't working anymore," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "We've grown apart. I think we both deserve a chance at happiness in our remaining years. Remaining years? I echoed. You make it sound like we're on our deathbeds. You know what I mean, he said impatiently. I'll always care for you, but I need more. I need passion and understanding. I didn't ask if Vanessa was providing these things. I already knew. What I didn't know was how quickly everything would unravel. The divorce was finalized in record time. Richard was generous with the settlement, or so my attorney said. I kept the house in Lakeside Heights, plus a modest alimony payment. Richard would continue paying for Thomas's final year of law school. It seemed fair on paper. What the settlement didn't account for was the emotional fallout. Thomas and Amanda were adults, 28 and 25 respectively, when the divorce happened. But they still took sides. And to my shock, they didn't take mine. Dad's been unhappy for years, Mom, Thomas told me over coffee one afternoon. You were always at the hospital, always putting patients first. I was working, I said, stunned by his perspective. Someone had to pay the bills and save for your education. Dad was working too, Amanda chimed in. He built a whole company while you were gone all those nights. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Had they forgotten the soccer games I'd attended with dark circles under my eyes? The school lunches I'd prepared after night shifts? The second job I'd taken to pay for Amanda's study abroad program? 3 months after the divorce, Richard married Vanessa in a lavish ceremony in the Bahamas. My children attended. I saw the photos on social media, both of them smiling beside their father and his new bride, who was draped in a designer gown that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. Dr. Patricia Wells, my supervisor and mentor at the hospital, was the only one who seemed to understand my pain. They're blinded by the glamour of it all, Helen, she said as we shared tea in her office. Richard's living the high life now, and they want to be part of that. They're not seeing the decades of sacrifice you made. They're adults, I said, trying to convince myself as much as her. They can make their own judgments. Perhaps. But sometimes even adults need to be reminded of the truth, Patricia said thoughtfully. I continued working at the hospital, pouring myself into my patients even more than before. The children on the oncology ward didn't judge me for my age or question my sacrifices. They just appreciated the extra time I spent reading to them, the way I remembered their favorite snacks, the gentle touch I developed over decades of practice. What I didn't tell anyone, not even Patricia, was that I'd been quietly making a name for myself in pediatric oncology nursing. Over the years, I developed several innovative care protocols that significantly improved the quality of life for young cancer patients. I'd written articles in medical journals under a pseudonym, not wanting to draw attention away from the doctors. I'd served as a consultant on difficult cases at other hospitals, again keeping a low profile. Patricia knew about some of it, but not the extent. She'd been encouraging me for years to publish under my own name, to seek recognition for my contributions. You're too modest, Helen, she'd say. You've revolutionized several aspects of pediatric oncology care, but no one knows it was you. The improvements speak for themselves. I'd reply, that's all that matters. The truth was, I'd always put my family's needs and feelings ahead of my own professional recognition. Richard had always been sensitive about his status, and I didn't want to risk outshining him in any way, so I kept my accomplishments quiet, focusing instead on being a supportive wife and mother. When I turned 60, the hospital organized a small celebration for my 3 decades of service. Patricia presented me with a plaque and a card signed by staff and many former patients. It was a touching gesture. But what meant even more was the letter I received that same day from the hospital board. In recognition of your outstanding contributions to pediatric oncology nursing, it read, we would like to offer you the position of Chief Nursing Officer for Pediatric Services. It was a prestigious role, one that came with a significant salary increase and would allow me to implement my care protocols across all pediatric departments. I called Thomas and Amanda immediately, eager to share the news. That's nice, Mom, Thomas said, sounding distracted. Listen, I can't really talk now. We're at Dad and Vanessa's place for dinner. Some potential investors are here. Oh, I said, deflated. Maybe we can celebrate this weekend? This promotion is a really big deal for me. This weekend is tough, he hedged. Vanessa's planning a boat trip to celebrate Dad's new product line. Maybe next month. I'll check my calendar. I hung up feeling hollow. Thomas had always been career-focused like his father, but there was a time when he would have at least pretended to be excited about my achievements. Amanda's response wasn't much better. Wow, Mom, that's great. But aren't you getting a bit old for such a demanding position? I mean, you could retire now if you wanted. I don't want to retire, I said, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. I love my work. This is a chance to make an even bigger difference. If this story touches you, don't forget to subscribe. There's more to come. Amanda's words lingered painfully in my mind. You could retire now. But I didn't want to retire. I needed this promotion, not just for the salary but for the chance to make a difference, to finally be recognized for decades of unseen work. The divorce settlement had seemed fair initially. Richard paid a modest alimony, covered Thomas's final year of law school, and I kept the house in Lakeside Heights. But soon I discovered he was manipulating the payments, citing fabricated business downturns to reduce alimony. I didn't contest it. The legal fees would have swallowed any gains, and I was too exhausted to fight. 3 months later, everything changed. It was a crisp autumn Saturday when Thomas and Amanda asked to meet me for lunch. They'd been acting strangely lately. Missed calls, vague excuses, and an unspoken tension. I hoped they wanted to apologize for missing my promotion celebration. We met at a cafe near my house, the house I'd maintained for 30 years, the house I'd fought to keep during the divorce. Mom, Thomas began, looking uncomfortable but determined. We need to talk to you about the house. What about it? I asked, setting down my coffee. Amanda jumped in. You know, it's really big for just one person, and the maintenance must be such a burden at your age. At my age, I repeated, feeling a familiar sting. I'm 62, not 92, and I manage the maintenance just fine. Thomas cleared his throat. The thing is, Mom, we've been talking with Dad and Vanessa about this. Expanding their family, Amanda added. Expanding their family? I interrupted sharply. Vanessa is pregnant? The thought of my ex-husband starting a new family with his former secretary made me feel sick. No, Amanda said quickly. They're planning to adopt. Vanessa has always wanted children, and there's this sibling group, 3 young kids who need a home. That was commendable, I said cautiously, unsure where this was heading. But they need more space, Thomas continued. Their current place is beautiful but too small for 3 children, and since you're alone in that big house. My blood ran cold as I finally understood. You want me to sell my house to Richard and Vanessa? They exchanged glances before Amanda spoke. Not exactly, Mom. We've already taken care of it. The paperwork was finalized yesterday. What paperwork? I demanded, my voice rising despite the public setting. The house transfer, Thomas said, slipping into lawyer mode. After some discussion, we determined that the most logical solution was to transfer ownership of the house to Dad and Vanessa. They'll be moving in next month. I stared at them, momentarily speechless. You determined? You transferred? That house is in my name. You can't transfer what isn't yours. Thomas looked uncomfortable. Actually, Mom, remember when you were hospitalized briefly last year for pneumonia? You signed a power of attorney form so we could handle your affairs while you recovered. A temporary medical power of attorney, I clarified, anger building in my chest. The document was broader than you realized, he admitted. It gave us authority to manage your assets in your best interest. And you determined that giving away your home was in your best interest. I was practically shaking now. That makes financial sense, Amanda argued. The property taxes and maintenance costs are eating into your retirement savings. This way, you can downsize to something more appropriate and invest the difference. What difference? I asked coldly. If you gave away my house, Where's the money from the sale? More uncomfortable glances between my children. It wasn't exactly a sale, Thomas admitted. More of a family transfer. But don't worry, Vanessa found you a really nice senior apartment complex. It's got activities, dining services, everything you need. A senior apartment complex. I repeated flatly. You're putting me in a retirement home. It's not a retirement home, Amanda protested. It's an active adult community, and it's only 15 minutes from the hospital. So you can still work if you insist. If I insist. I could barely recognize my own children in that moment. I'm the chief nursing officer of pediatric services at one of Boston's top hospitals. Of course, I'm going to continue working. Mom, be reasonable, Thomas said, using his negotiating voice. This is the best solution for everyone. The kids need a stable home, and you need something more manageable. What I need, I said, standing up so abruptly my chair scraped loudly against the floor, is for my children to respect me and my property. That house is mine. I worked for it. I maintained it. It's not yours to give away. It's done, Mom, Amanda said firmly. The paperwork is filed. Vanessa has already started measuring for renovations. I looked at them, these two people I'd raised, nurtured, sacrificed for, and saw nothing of myself reflected back. They were strangers wearing familiar faces. When am I expected to vacate my home? I asked, voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. You have 30 days, Thomas replied. But the apartment will be ready next week, so you can move whenever you're ready. How generous, I said, gathering my purse. Don't expect me at Sunday dinner anymore. In fact, don't expect anything from me at all. I walked out of the cafe with my head held high. But once inside my car, the modest sedan I'd purchased after the divorce, I finally allowed the tears to fall. 30 years of memories erased with a signature. 30 years of sacrifice dismissed as irrelevant. But beneath the grief, something else was building, anger. And with that anger came clarity. I'd spent my entire life playing by the rules, putting others first, staying humble about my accomplishments. Where had it gotten me? Betrayed by my husband. Abandoned by my children. About to be evicted from my own home. As I drove back to the house that apparently no longer belonged to me, I made a decision. I wasn't going down without a fight. For once in my life, I was going to put myself first. I pulled into my driveway and sat there for a moment, staring at the colonial facade I'd lovingly maintained for decades. Every shutter painted by my hand. Every flower bed planted during precious free weekends. This wasn't just a house. It was the physical manifestation of my life's work. And somehow, through legal manipulation, my own children had taken it from me. I pulled out my phone and dialed a number I rarely used. Patricia. It's Helen. I need your help. And I think it's finally time I published those articles under my real name. The battle for my home, and my dignity, had just begun. Patricia listened intently as I explained the situation over tea in her elegant Cambridge home. Unlike my stark active adult apartment with its generic beige walls and industrial carpeting, Patricia's historic Victorian had character and warmth, much like its owner. They used a power of attorney to transfer your house? Patricia's voice rose in disbelief. Helen, that sounds highly questionable legally. I nodded, clutching my teacup tightly. Thomas claims it was within the scope of the document I signed. He's a lawyer, so I assume he found some loophole. A loophole or not, it's morally reprehensible. Patricia set her cup down with unusual force. You need your own attorney, one who isn't afraid to go up against your son. I've already called someone, I admitted. James Wilson. He specializes in elder law and financial abuse cases. Patricia raised an eyebrow. Elder law? You're hardly elderly, Helen. That's not how my children see it, I said bitterly. According to them, I'm 1 foot in the grave, incapable of maintaining my own home or making my own decisions. I'd spent the past week packing up 30 years of memories, sorting photographs, children's artwork, holiday ornaments, deciding what could fit in my new miniature living space and what I'd have to discard. Each item I touched brought back memories. Thomas's high school graduation tassel, Amanda's first ballet slippers, the serving platter Richard and I had received as a wedding gift. My life reduced to boxes and black garbage bags. Have you confronted Richard about this? Patricia asked. He won't take my calls, I replied. His assistant, not Vanessa, a new one, says he's unavailable whenever I phone. I sent an email, and all I got was a formal response expressing regret for any misunderstanding and assuring me the transition would be handled professionally. Patricia snorted. Professionally? There's nothing professional about stealing your home. According to Thomas, they're doing me a favor. The apartment complex has amenities I couldn't possibly manage without. I couldn't keep the sarcasm from my voice. Like what? A bingo hall. Patricia rolled her eyes. Precisely. Along with water aerobics and weekly bus trips to the mall. I shook my head. Meanwhile, Vanessa had already hired contractors to modernize my kitchen. Apparently, my carefully restored 1920s cabinetry was depressingly vintage. Patricia's expression darkened. This is beyond disrespectful, Helen. It's predatory. I know, I said quietly. That's why I've decided to fight back. Patricia leaned forward. What's your plan? I took a deep breath. First, I'm meeting with James Wilson tomorrow to explore my legal options. Second, I'm accepting the keynote speaker invitation for the International Pediatric Oncology Nursing Conference next month. Patricia's eyes widened. Helen, that's wonderful. You've turned it down 3 years running because you didn't want to draw attention to yourself. But now I think it's time the world knew exactly who developed the Carter Protocol for pain management in pediatric cancer patients. The protocol named after your ex-husband's company? Patricia clarified with a slow smile spreading across her face. The very same, I confirmed. Richard has been taking credit for funding that research for years, building his company's reputation on my work. He even named it after Carter Enterprises as a charitable contribution, but he didn't fund it. I developed that protocol on my own time, using my own resources, while working full-time and raising his children. Patricia looked thoughtful. The hospital has documentation proving you're the sole developer. The board would back you. They already have, I replied. When I told Administrator Jenkins about my situation, he was livid. Apparently, Richard has been leveraging his connection to the Carter Protocol to secure government contracts for years. Jenkins is more than happy to set the record straight. This could damage Richard's business reputation significantly, Patricia pointed out. I'm counting on it, I said with more steel in my voice than I'd ever allowed myself before. But that's not all, I added. I've also decided to accept the research grant from the Wilkins Foundation. Patricia nearly spilled her tea. The $2 million grant? Helen, that's incredible. When did they offer it to you? 6 months ago, I admitted. I turned it down initially because I didn't want to uproot my life. I was comfortable in my house, happy with my routine. The grant requires relocating to their research facility in Rhode Island for at least a year. But now that you've been effectively evicted, you have nothing holding you back, Patricia finished for me. Yes. The Wilkins Foundation is renewing their offer with an increased stipend for housing and a dedicated support staff. And they're adding something new. They want to name their pediatric pain management wing after me. The Helen Carter Wing, Patricia beamed. It has a lovely ring to it. It does, doesn't it? I smiled for the first time in weeks. And it comes with a very public dedication ceremony next quarter, one that will be covered by medical journals and local news outlets. Your children will see it, Patricia realized. And Richard and Vanessa? Everyone who thought I was just a nurse, just a housewife, just an aging woman ready for a retirement home. They'll all see exactly what I've accomplished while they weren't paying attention. The next morning I met James Wilson at his downtown office. Unlike Thomas with his slick corporate law firm, James operated a smaller practice focused on protecting vulnerable clients. His office was comfortable but unpretentious, lined with family photos and case law books. "Mrs. Carter," he greeted me warmly, "I've reviewed the documents you sent over. I'll be direct, what your children did falls into a gray area legally, but it doesn't look good." "How gray are we talking?" I asked. "The power of attorney document is unusually broad." He slid a copy across his desk. "Most medical POAs are limited to healthcare decisions during incapacity. This one includes provisions for property management that would typically be found in a financial power of attorney." "I never intended to give them control over my house," I said firmly. "I believe you," James nodded. "And a judge might as well. The problem is proving you didn't understand what you were signing. You're a highly educated healthcare professional. No one's going to believe you couldn't comprehend a legal document." "Thomas brought it to me in the hospital," I recalled. "I had pneumonia, was on strong antibiotics, and had just received a breathing treatment. I was hardly at my sharpest." James made a note. "That helps. Any witnesses?" "The hospital staff," I replied. "And there should be medical records documenting my condition." "Good." He nodded again. "Now, about the transfer itself. There's something odd there too. Normally, a house sale generates funds that would go to you, but according to these documents, the property was transferred for a nominal fee of $1. $1. I repeated incredulously. "My house is worth over $850,000. "Exactly," James said grimly. "That alone raises red flags about the intentions behind this transfer. It's one thing to sell a property on your behalf and give you the proceeds. It's another to essentially give it away to family members who directly benefit." "So, do we have a case?" I asked hopefully. "We have grounds to challenge the transfer," he clarified. "I won't promise victory, but I believe we can at least delay the process and possibly get the transfer invalidated. At minimum, we should be able to secure fair market compensation for your property." "I don't want compensation," I said firmly. "I want my house back." James looked sympathetic but cautious. "Mrs. Carter, I understand your attachment, but if your son and ex-husband have already started renovations, they've invested in a property they don't legally own." "That's their problem, not mine," I finished. A hint of admiration flickered across James's face. "You're tougher than you look, Mrs. Carter. I like that. Let's file for an emergency injunction today to halt any further renovations or move-in plans. That will buy us time to build our case." As I left James's office, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. For the first time since the divorce, I was taking control rather than simply reacting to circumstances others had created for me. That evening, I received a furious call from Thomas. "Mom, what is this injunction?" he demanded without preamble. Dad and Vanessa were in the middle of kitchen demolition when they got served with papers. "How unfortunate for them," I replied calmly. "They shouldn't have started renovations on a house they don't legally own." "This is ridiculous," Thomas snapped. "You signed a legally binding power of attorney. The transfer is valid." "That's for a judge to decide," I said. "In the meantime, they should probably stop destroying my property." "It's not your property anymore." Thomas's voice rose. "Why are you being so difficult? We found you a nice place to live, close to the hospital. Most mothers would be grateful their children were looking out for them." "Looking out for me?" I echoed in disbelief. "You took my home, the home I maintained for 30 years, and gave it to your father's new wife for nothing. How exactly is that looking out for me?" "You're twisting the situation," Thomas argued. "The house was too big for you. The maintenance was becoming a burden. We made a practical decision. A practical decision would have been selling the house at market value and giving me the proceeds," I countered. "Not handing it over to Richard and Vanessa for $1. Thomas went quiet for a moment. "Who told you it was $1? He asked. My attorney, I replied. And unlike you, he's actually representing my interests. Mom, be reasonable. Thomas's tone shifted to the condescending one he'd adopted since the divorce. Fighting this will only drain your savings on legal fees. Dad's corporate attorneys will bury your case in paperwork. Let them try, I said evenly. By the way, how is your father handling the news about the keynote address? What keynote address? Thomas sounded genuinely confused. The International Pediatric Oncology Nursing Conference next month. I'm the keynote speaker. I'll be discussing my development of the Carter Protocol. Silence stretched across the line. That's not possible, Thomas finally stammered. Dad developed that protocol through Carter Enterprises' research division. I laughed, genuinely amused by his ignorance. Is that what he told you? Carter Enterprises doesn't have a research division, Thomas. It never did. I developed that protocol independently on nights and weekends while working full-time and raising you and your sister. Your father simply took credit for it to enhance his company's reputation. I don't believe you, Thomas said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. You don't have to believe me, I replied. The hospital has all the documentation, so does the medical board. So do the journals where I published my research under a pseudonym because your father thought it would confuse clients if I became known for medical innovations while he was trying to build a healthcare supply business. Another long pause. If what you're saying is true, Thomas said slowly, why are you only bringing this up now? Because for 30 years I put my family's needs ahead of my own recognition, I explained. I let your father take credit because it helped his business, which supported our family. I published under a pseudonym to keep peace in our marriage. I downplayed my accomplishments so Richard's ego wouldn't be bruised. I took a deep breath before continuing. But now, you've taken my home, dismissed my career, and treated me like an inconvenient elderly relative to be tucked away in a retirement community. So I've decided it's finally time to set the record straight. Mom, you need to think about what you're doing, Thomas warned. Dad's company could suffer if this goes public. I've thought about it very carefully, I assured him. In fact, I've been thinking about little else since you and your sister informed me you'd given away my house. I've made my decision. I ended the call and turned off my phone, unwilling to feel the barrage of messages that would undoubtedly follow. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't considering how my actions would affect Richard or my children. I was thinking only of justice, and perhaps a small measure of righteous vengeance. The following morning, I sat across from James Wilson in his office, the legal papers neatly arranged on the desk between us. Signing the injunction to halt the property transfer felt like the first real victory in a long time. Mrs. Carter, James said, folding his hands thoughtfully, this injunction will stop any further renovations or occupancy until the court hears the case. That buys us time to gather evidence and build your case. I nodded, relieved but aware the hardest part was still ahead. Have you considered how this will affect your relationship with your children? James asked gently. I paused. I don't expect it to improve immediately. But the house is about more than just bricks and mortar. It's about my agency, my voice that's been silenced for too long. James smiled knowingly. That kind of clarity will help you through this. Leaving the office, I felt a spark of hope for the first time in months. I immediately called Patricia. We've got the injunction, I said, breathless. The house isn't theirs to change anymore. That's fantastic news, Helen, she exclaimed. Now you can focus on the keynote address. That's going to change everything. I agreed. The conference was a chance not only to reclaim my professional identity but to share the innovations I'd fought so hard to develop in silence. Over the next weeks, the media caught wind of the legal battle. I was careful to keep details private but allowed Patricia to provide a statement about protecting elder rights and intellectual property. The hospital rallied behind me. Administrator Jenkins publicly affirmed my contributions to the Carter Protocol and pledged full institutional support. At home, my new apartment felt less like a cage and more like a command center. Stacks of documents, notes for the keynote, and the occasional photo of the colonial house surrounded me. One afternoon, a text from Amanda surprised me. "Mom, can we talk? I want to understand everything better." Her message stirred conflicting emotions, but I responded immediately. Our conversation was tentative at first, but as Amanda opened up about feeling caught between loyalty to her father and recognizing the hurt she'd caused me, I felt the possibility of healing. "I never understood how much you sacrificed," she admitted. "I thought you were just Mom, not this brilliant woman with a career and ideas that changed children's lives." I smiled softly. "I wanted you to see all of me, Amanda, not just the parts that made your life easier." We agreed to work toward a new relationship, built on honesty and respect. The day of the conference arrived quickly. Standing at the podium, the bright lights and the sea of faces reminded me of all the reasons I'd pursued nursing and research. I spoke about the development of the Helen Protocol, its impact on pediatric pain management, and the future directions of my work. When I addressed the recent challenges in my personal life, my voice did not waver. "Pain is universal, but suffering need not be," I said firmly. For decades, I remained silent, letting others take credit for my work and sidelining my own voice. Today, I reclaim both my work and my worth. The applause that followed was more than professional recognition. It was a validation of my entire journey. After the conference, the Wilkins Foundation renewed their offer. Their proposal included funding, dedicated research space, and a public dedication of the Helen Carter Wing. Accepting this was more than a career move, it was a public declaration of my reclaimed identity. Back home, I visited the colonial house with Patricia and James. The contractors had halted renovations. The kitchen still bore scars of demolition, but it was my house again. "I want every detail restored exactly as it was," I told Martin, the contractor. "But I also want the house to reflect the strength it took to save it." Patricia squeezed my hand. "This house is more than a building now, it's a monument to your resilience." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The reversal papers were signed swiftly. Officially, the colonial was mine again. I walked through its empty halls, feeling the weight of memories in every corner. The laughter, the tears, the sacrifices. Restoration began immediately. Contractors worked carefully to bring back the character I had preserved for decades, while subtly updating it with modern conveniences. Amanda surprised me one crisp morning at the house, cup of coffee in hand. "I want to help with the restoration decisions," she said quietly. Her willingness to be part of this process felt like a fragile olive branch. We spent hours discussing paint colors, cabinetry styles, and garden plans. Moments I'd never expected to share with her. It wasn't just about the house. It was about rebuilding trust. Thomas remained more distant but made efforts to bridge the gap. His apology had been heartfelt, and though wounds lingered, I saw the beginnings of understanding. He even sent me articles on elder law and nursing innovations, small gestures that meant more than words. Professionally, I flourished. My keynote address opened doors I had kept closed for years. The Wilkins Foundation's generous grant allowed me to expand the Helen Protocol to new patient groups and resource-limited settings. I embraced the new role as Director of Innovation in Pediatric Care at Boston Memorial with enthusiasm, mentoring young nurses and researchers who reminded me of my younger self. The dedication of the Helen Carter Wing was a triumph. Surrounded by colleagues, family, and friends, I accepted the honor with quiet pride. Amanda and Thomas sat side by side in the front row, their smiles genuine. It was a moment of reconciliation, not just for me, but for all of us. Richard's presence in my life diminished. He had stepped down from Carter Enterprises amid the scandal. Vanessa and he divorced quietly. Our paths diverged, each forced to reckon with the consequences of choices made years ago. The colonial house, once a symbol of betrayal, became a place of purpose. I transformed part of it into housing for medical fellows, a way to support young professionals struggling with Boston's high living costs. The house was alive again, filled with laughter and learning. Meanwhile, the Craftsman House in Brookfield, Olivia's brother's gift, became my sanctuary, a peaceful retreat where I nurtured my garden and myself. It was here I found balance, a space to reflect and grow beyond the shadows of the past. Reflecting on the year, I realized that my fight was never just about a house or recognition. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my voice, and my right to define my own life. I had been Helen Carter, wife, mother, nurse, for decades, but now I was Helen Carter, innovator, leader, and fiercely independent woman. As I watched the sun set over the gardens I had tended and the home I had fought to keep, I felt a profound peace. The past could not be changed, but the future was mine to shape. And for the first time in a long time, I was exactly where I needed to be.